Hello, my friends. So welcome to our May Blissipline. and I'm going to start with this video, which is going to be like an intro to the practice. And then I'm going to add to it over the course of the month. So this first video introduces a concept. Yes, a concept, but a practice that I started doing very, very, very intentionally, deliberately, and consistently when I was in my early 30s. And now I'm in my late 50s, so it's been a while that I have been doing this practice. And of course, I've changed a lot in that time. And this practice has kept serving me. I would say it might be one of the most profound practices that I've done. So I thought as we return into this monthly Blissipline practice, I'd start here. So this practice was first presented to me as a set of 2 questions. And so I think that's a pretty good place to start. So the first question that I was invited to ask myself as a practice was, right here, right now, am I choosing from love or fear? So that was the first question. So just stop to ask myself, right here, right now, am I choosing from love or fear? And then just check. Whatever is going on, whether I'm about to go shopping or about to brush my teeth or about to make a difficult phone call or whatever it is, right here, right now, am I choosing from love or fear? Okay? And so then check and listen to what's going on inside. So back then, the answer was almost always fear. Like really, really, really almost always fear. So the first step for me was acknowledging that fear was in the driver's seat. And that was a really, really important starting point to acknowledge what was going on with me. So acknowledging where we are is so important. I like to think of the metaphor of the GPS, and so you have a GPS and you put in your destination, right? But if the GPS doesn't know where you are, there's no way to give you a route, right? So where you are is an important part of the equation. So this first step of seeing just how often I was living in some kind of state of fear was very, very important. It wasn't always comfortable to acknowledge that. Sometimes I felt, shame or anger or frustration or a lot of shame. So it wasn't always comfortable, but it was important for me to begin to see that that was what was driving the bus so often. So then in time, I added my own middle step here. I added what I now call the 3 magic words. And those words are, okay, got it. Okay, got it. Those are what I call the 3 magic words. So the okay, got it is a kind of a doorway to self-acceptance. So self-acceptance in this moment is a relief of self-criticism, self-loathing, self-hatred, despair, and it's important. It's not the first step. The first step is self-acknowledgement, right? So, fear, I see you. Okay, got it, right? Okay, got it. Self-acknowledgement, I see the fear. But that's a doorway to maybe later, maybe not the same day, maybe a year from now, but later the self-acceptance. Say, I see I'm feeling fear right now. Oh, okay, got it. And now the okay, got it has maybe a little more compassion, a little more understanding, a little bit more, wow, yeah, this sounds hard for you. A little kindness in it, right? And then eventually, first self-acknowledgement, then self-acceptance, and then eventually self-love. So this is the process that okay, got it, the 3 magic words guide us through. Okay, so going back to our process today, we had our first question, right here, right now, am I choosing from love or fear? And whatever the answer was, okay, got it, with the most acceptance and kindness possible, okay? So then, if the answer was fear, which it, as I mentioned, almost always was, then we had a second question. And the second question was this: if I was choosing from love, or if I were choosing from love, what would I choose? So that's the second question. And through practice, I learned to sit with that question, not insist on an answer right away, but sit with the question itself, to allow the question to be where I was resting. What would I choose? Well, if love was guiding me, if I were choosing from love, And so as I sat with this question, a kind of a subtle alchemy could take place. It developed a willingness and a kindness towards who I actually am in this moment that could sometimes emerge. So first this sort of alchemy of kindness, and then sometimes an answer of some kind would just arise. So this sitting with the question itself is a really powerful learning, and it's a very powerful allowing. It's an acknowledgement of the truth of this is what is true for me. I am living in this question right now. Ah, yes, this is a question for me. Okay, got it. You see, it's not demanding an answer. It's honoring that I'm living a question. And this is how Rilke put it. He suggested living the questions. And there's this wonderful quote from Letters from a Young Poet that I'm going to read to you. I have it right here. He's writing to his 19-year-old protege. So it's written to a 19-year-old. And he says, I want to beg you as much as I can, dear sir. Don't you love that? To be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart. Be patient to what is unsolved, and try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Isn't that a great image? Loving this question as if it's a book you can't yet understand. He says, do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to live them. It's not interesting. You can't be given the answer because you're not ready to live it. And then he says, and the point is to live everything, right? We're alive to live everything. Live the questions now. And then perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Now, of course, he's talking to a 19-year-old about poetry. So this might not be a distant day for you. Okay? So this is the way of being in the question. So the second question again, if I were choosing from love, what would I choose? So I learned to sit gently with the second question. And as I began to do that, what would happen was I would begin to discern some of the thoughts and assumptions that were driving the fear, beliefs or thoughts, assumptions, or just genuinely made up crap, right? I would begin to discern them. I would see that some of them were false or at least unprovable, right? And as I asked, what would I do if I were choosing from love? I would come back into contact with what I did in fact love in this moment. What part of this current thing was important to me, what I cared about and what I loved. And that would remind me of other things that were important to me that I'd forgotten. So this living of the question began an opening into a new way of perceiving the moment, perceiving what was in front of me. So what was really, really interesting about this process, now I'm describing an evolution that's happened over time, but at the very beginning, when I was just asking it, and I would be like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? If I were choosing from love, what would I do? Very, very often, as I really asked that question, I would find that even though I was about to do something out of fear, like, gotta go to work, I'm gonna go out of work. When I came back to what would I do if I were choosing from love, I would very often make the same choice, but I would do it from a loving place. However, sometimes I would make a different choice, not always the opposite choice, sometimes a slightly modified choice. So there's something to know here about the fear brain. The fear brain is very black and white. The fear brain is very this or that. The fear brain is very limited. When we are in a state of activation from fear, the parts of us that are the parts of the brain that are active are not the nuanced, let's get creative parts of the brain. They're the fear-based, how do we cope with this part of the brain? So as we sit with the question and allow ourselves to begin to settle into the question, the possibility of what love would do here, what I would do choosing from love, we begin literally to activate parts of the brain that were dormant in fear, parts of the brain that were shut down in fear, and now they come back online, and now the creative parts of the brain are woken up. The rational parts of the brain, the more nuanced parts of the brain, the parts that remember more, okay? So this is how this practice works. And so I'll just tell you, I did, as I said, practice this a lot. I put Post-its up. I wrote it on my hand, L/F, love or fear. I even went so far as to have a little necklace made that I could put notes into myself so I could practice this. And here's a fun story. I finally lost that necklace on the Coney Island cyclone. I was going, that's a roller coaster in Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York, and I was going over and it just flew off my head. It was gone forever. So I thought I'd just share that with you. So, so when I started practicing this in my early 30s, it was a very volatile time in my life. It was filled with uncertainty. Things had gone wrong. And I was pretty depressed. And this was before I had done all the healing work I did through mindfulness, through therapy, through somatic trauma healing stuff. So I was in a lot of emotional, mental pain, and there were a lot of circumstances that were very hard to deal with. And I ended up doing this on all kinds of little things, like whether or not I was going to get up out of bed and go brush my teeth before I went to sleep for the night. And on bigger things like, should I take a really low-paying job that I don't care about while I try and get my music career back on track? So, but in both cases, I could see as I was doing it how when fear was driving the conversation, it was so limited. And when I began to open up to love, many, many new possibilities came on board. Okay? So now in the decades since then, the practice has evolved as I have evolved. So I still find it very valuable. It's a more nuanced thing. It's easier, but it continues to be valuable. So let me tell you a little bit about the love-fear continuum. Okay, so for this, I have this little whiteboard here. Make sure I'm on camera. Okay. So maybe you've heard of my work doing continuum work. I have a group called Continuum. We meet once a week live to work together. And I ended up calling it that because my work began to see how if I worked with continuums with people, continua, it led a lot more clarity to the conversation. So in this one, we're talking about the continuum from fear to love, okay? So at this end of the spectrum, fear, and at this end of the spectrum, love. Now, if we look at this as a continuum, as a spectrum, we can imagine that right down here at the, I can't get the lid off. There we go. At the extreme end of the spectrum, if we were in fear, this would be really overwhelming stuff, like it could be terror, or it could also be depression, which is a really profound fear. That's a fear of everything, right? A fear of life, a fear of the moment, overwhelmment, despair. So all those feelings up here. And then if we're sort of up here with love, this could be joy and bliss and delight, things like that, right? And then there's this whole spectrum in the middle where we could be sort of like worry might be here, you know, or concern might be here, right? So all of these different levels of fear, and up here, all these different levels of, like, we might just tip over from concern into hope, right? So a little bit further along, curiosity, right? That's a loving state. Like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I could work this out. Or playfulness, right? I had one more. Let me just remember what it was. Oh, creativity, right? So creativity up here. I can't write that, T-I-V-I-T-Y, something like that. Don't hold me to the spellings. So we can see there's a continuum. Now, where you are on this continuum determines somewhat how this practice is going to work for you. So say you are really, really, really feeling despair. So you're really down here. You're sort of spinning around in this area down here. As you ask the question about what you would do if you were feeling love, you might not be able to go all the way over here, but you might just move slowly in this direction until you can just tip over into vague hopefulness, you know? But if you're here, you might be able to find your way all the way to curiosity and creativity. And interestingly, as we practice this, let's say you're here in curiosity, and you're really happy, but you ask the question and you think, oh, I'm choosing from love, then you might find your way all the way over to joy and bliss. So we sort of, and the reason I make this sort of like eight symbol here is we sort of go back and forth in one little range over and over again. The mind will do a pros and cons, and so we kind of go back and forth, but it'll tend to be a pretty narrow range that we're operating in. So we're just gradually moving along this continuum as we go from fear to love. All right, so fear to love is a continuum. So it might be that you don't feel loving, but you might feel relief. That's such an important one. Relief is the feeling you feel as you move in this direction from anything to anything. So as you move from depression to worry, there's a feeling of relief. Anger is in here, by the way. Anger is in here. Fury is in here. That's a fear-based emotion. You don't feel angry unless you're concerned that something bad is going to happen, right? Anger is a boundary in situations in which you're fearful of something bad happening. So all of these emotions, as we move toward this end, we'll get a feeling of relief as we do each one, okay? So this is the fear-love continuum here. All right, and so I say that to you because I'm not expecting you to go like, oh, I love the whole world. I love this person in front of me who's forcing me to make this agonizing decision. No, none of that. Just we're moving in the direction from the fear end of the continuum to the love end of the continuum, toward the love end of the continuum, okay? I will say too, by the way, anytime you kind of tip over this line, it's all good. It's fun to live in all these places. Like sometimes you don't always really want everything going perfectly. You want a certain amount of challenge. It's fun to sort of just dip underneath here and go, oh, it's going to work out. Okay, hold on, and call on your ingenuity, right? But living down at this end of the spectrum is awful. Awful, awful, awful. And so if you're living down here, this is why we want to edge you upwards. There's nothing wrong with dipping down into here sometimes. It's just life, right? As soon as you try something new, something's going to go awry, And so unless you're going to live a very unadventurous life, you're going to dip down here, and that's just fine, okay? Okay, so one more thing on this before I wrap up. Well, actually, two more things, but one more thing on the love fear question. Just going back to my notes. Okay, yeah. So there's a way I like to think about this that is actually a teaching that a lot of spiritual teachers give, and I really appreciated this the first time I heard it. It makes so much great sense to me. At our core, we are just full of love. Love just flows through us. And for many people who have a kind of a sense of the spiritual world, this understanding of universal love being kind of a foundation flowing through us is very, very like a familiar feeling. But even at a strictly, like looking at little children, when there is a little child who has a good life, right? That child's just full of exuberance and love, and like, oh, the grass is exciting, and this cookie is exciting, and the grasshopper is exciting, and there's just a delight in the world. It's this natural thing, and this gets dimmed over time as we end up with so many concerns. But in Blissipline, we're training ourselves to reconnect with it, even while life is still complicated. And so the thing that I like to think about is that fear and love are not really opposites, but in fact, fear is the absence of love. So the teaching for this is this. You know how light is a thing, right? And so light comes from the sun and shines down on the planet and gets inside of everything, creates all the energy, and it's actually sunlight is the energy we use with fossil fuels and everything else when we're turning them into light in a light bulb. So light is a thing. You can measure it, you can feel it, it is a thing. Darkness is not a thing. Darkness is the absence of light. And so every night the world turns, and the part of us that's facing the sun goes and turns away from the sun, but it's not actually in darkness as darkness thing. It's literally in the shadow of the earth. The sun is still shining like crazy. It's just in the shadow that is cast by the earth because it's turned around. So darkness is an absence of light. And we all know if you've ever been in a dark room and you want it not to be so dark, what do? You add light. You don't turn down darkness because it's not a thing. You add light to it. You see, it's all, we all know this. You can even take a little teeny flashlight and in the darkness, it'll make a big difference. So the reason this is a helpful metaphor for us is if we consider fear not as the opposite of love, but as the absence of love, then we bring love into the equation when there is fear. We don't try and get rid of the fear any more than we try and get rid of the darkness. We bring love into the situation. And that's what this practice is going to give you a chance to learn how to do. So that's why, that's why we say, if I were choosing from love, what would I choose? We bring love into it, just like we would bring in a candle into the darkness, or a little teeny pen light, or our phone light. You know, we all have flashlights to carry on with us, around with us now. I kind of love that. So fear is not the opposite of love, it's the absence of love. And in the presence of love, fear diminishes and eventually dissipates. Okay? Now, I'm going to leave that here for today. I want to remind you, though, of the practice, because in this, we rock it till we grok it. That is our Blissipline reminder, right? We rock it till we grok it. So this is not just an idea, it is a practice. As an idea, it becomes something to discuss, to argue about. Is it really the absence of love? Is it, you know? But as a practice, it is life transforming. And that is what I'm encouraging you to do. So here are the questions again. The first question we ask ourselves all the time, whenever you remember, do Post-its, put an alert on your phone. Right here, right now. Am I choosing from love or fear? Just check. Am I choosing from love or fear? And then, no matter the answer, whatever it is, whatever it's specifically something at some end of the spectrum or the other, whatever the answer, we say, okay, got it. 3 magic words. Okay, got it. With as much self-acceptance as we can muster. And if we can't muster very much, that's okay. Just, okay, got it. God damn it. That's okay. All right? Then, if the answer is fear, we ask ourselves the second question. If I were choosing from love, what would I choose? We ask the question, and then we sit with the question. What would I choose? We just sit with it. Let it sort of churn things up within us and bring love into the consideration. Okay? All right. So that is our intro to the May Blissipline. And over the course of the month, I'm going to do 3 more videos. The first one I'm going to put up sometime next week is going to be about how the practice of choosing from love or fear is affected by trauma. Because I know a lot of people in here have written, when you join Blissipline, there's a question, how can I help you? A lot of people have written about trauma, have written about the fight or flight response, have written about being caught in a state of anxiety. And trauma complicates this, no question, all right? So we will get to that, but please practice anyway. Trauma, one of its tricks is it tells you there's no point in practicing. It's a trick, all right? So we'll be talking about trauma. We'll be talking about the conditioned mind. We'll be talking about the ways trauma affects us and makes it hard to do things like this, but also how we can find a way around it, okay? So that's next week. And then the following week, we're going to talk about love or fear question around money and work. Because money, oh my God, that is a source of fear for so many people. And it kind of ties into work, obviously, for most people. And so we're going to talk about that. And then the fourth one we're going to talk about is love and fear and allowing yourself to want what you want. So opening up to what you want, opening up to just seeing what it's like to allow yourself to want what you want, where that can lead you. All right. So that's the plan for our May Blissipline. And post any questions in the Facebook group. Please do, in the Blissipline group. Post them in there. Let's work on this together. If you try it and it's like really frustrating, post it and tag me so I know. Okay. And I'll reply. We truly, truly are in this together, my friends. Let's make this work for you. Okay.